The following is a GoPowerCat.com production.
It is 44 in Ames, Iowa, 67 in Lubbock, Texas, 68 degrees in Manhattan, Kansas, and here in Studio 73 in Frisco, Texas, it is a nice 70 degrees. It is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hello, everybody. Again, this is the Big 12 Insiders. This is Brien Hanley. Today, again, we've got guests Alec, Busse, Jarret Johnson. What is going on, fellas?
Jarret, good game last night.
Yes, great game last night, Jarret. Great game last night. And we'll get into a lot of that. As always, everybody, again, Tuesday through Friday, Big 12 Insiders. We are live 1 p.m. Central Time. Remember, it's on GoPowerCat.com. Remember to always like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and the notification bell. So, well, gentlemen, let's get into this. I mean, first off, last night, Jarret, that was a crazy a basketball. I think it was a crazy result. I don't think that Texas Tech fans think that it was a crazy result. And watching basketball all year like I have, I mean, we can say it was surprising, but going on the road in the Big 12, 29 points is crazy, but going on the road trying to win against good competition, I don't think it's anything surprising, Jarret.
Well, Kansas has been two completely different teams at home and away this year.
Yeah,
I think they're 1-5 now in the Big 12 on the road.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but something like that. And that's really weird for a top 10 team to have that poor of a record in any way. And then Kevin McCullough, former Red Raider, Kansas's leading scorer, was out,
Right.
which, you know, I think we talked about on this show. I do so many of these, I can't remember if it was this show or not, but every team in the Big 12 is getting beat up. It's, cannibalizing each other, the conferences. And so there'll be ebbs and flows. There'll be downtimes. Tech got hit by the flu bug, some injury problems. They had that 3-game losing streak, and they're just coming back from it. Picked up 2 big wins, with obviously Monday night being the exclamation mark. I can't say that I'm surprised that Tech won at home against Kansas, considering all that I just mentioned. But by 29 points, I mean, the last time Tech beat Kansas by that much was 2019, and that's when they went to the national championship game. So I'm not saying this team is anything like that team other than that result, and that's what an exclamation mark that win was for Texas Tech Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into the game, I felt like Texas Tech was deserving of being the Vegas betting line favorite like they were, and I actually thought that they were going to win. So I agree with you, Jarret. I wasn't going to be surprised if they won last night, just with how poor Kansas has played on the road in the Big 12 outside of their one road game at Oklahoma State, where they rolled Oklahoma State, which honestly is kind of funny because Oklahoma State's played a lot of close games at Galliver-Iba against every other team they've played except Kansas. But yeah, I think it's time to have a serious conversation about, like, how good is this Kansas team really? Is this a Kansas team that is good enough to win the Big 12? Is this a Kansas team that's good enough to make it to a Sweet 16? Like, I think that those are legitimate questions. Like, they're going to be a top 4 seed. They're probably going to be a 2 seed, I would imagine. But their personnel certainly raises a lot of questions, especially when they're down their best player in Kevin McCullough, and he's been dealing with a knee injury for a little bit now. We've seen him kind of miss a couple games, back-to-back games here. He's missed 3 games out of however many Kansas has played here recently because of the knee. Dwan Harris is now dealing with that foot or ankle injury that he hurt at the end of the Baylor game. All those things kind of combined, and we know this Kansas team doesn't have a lot of depth, and they're not very good on the road. So there's legitimate questions about how far this KU team can really go, given some of the personnel questions that I have about them right now.
Absolutely, especially them playing away from home, which kind of leads us into a segue of what I was going to get into a little bit today is, can anybody win this conference besides Kansas and Houston? Taking a look at it, I mean, you look from the outside looking in, everybody thinks, okay, Kansas and Houston, they're the 2 highest ranked teams, or they're going to come out of the Big 12. Anybody that's paid attention, though, that's on the inside looking from the outside, thinking, yeah, I don't know that those are the teams. I mean, Houston is trying to separate itself, but you just look at it, guys. I'm not sure that those 2 are just the clear-cut favorites to win this conference. Like we said, Kansas has 5 losses. I mean, if you'd have told me at the beginning of the year that Kansas was going to have 5 losses in this conference, I'd have told you were crazy, but they have 5 losses. So is anybody else besides those two, and I'll start with you, Alec, do you think can, especially because I like Iowa State's team, I like their makeup, but do you think anybody else can win the Big 12 outside of those two teams?
Yeah, I certainly think Houston should be viewed as the undisputed favorite in the league right now. The way that they play defense certainly gives me a lot of reason to believe that they can win on any court in the Big 12 the rest of the way. I think Iowa State's a team that I've started to really come around on here of late, talking defensively still. I mean, they're a top 3, top 5 defense in the entire country. And when you're that good defensively, I think you're good enough to go on the road and beat a lot of teams in the conference. And I think that that's really the big trick to having success in the Big 12 is having a really good defense. And I also think Iowa State's offense has kind of developed to a point now where they have enough shot makers. And they have a really good backcourt with Tamin Lipsey, Keyshawn Gilbert, Curtis Jones comes off the bench. Milan Momcilovic is a really good shooter, where they've got enough guys to kind of avoid those long stretches where they don't score like they've had the last 2 years under TJ Otzelberger. And now in his 3rd season at Iowa State, they've crept in the top 50 of offensive efficiency nationally here of late. I think that their guard play is good enough to put pressure on the rim. And I think that they've got enough bigs that are good enough on the offensive glass to create enough second chance opportunities. And they do such a good job of forcing turnovers that I think that they have an opportunity to get a lot of buckets on the other end. I think Jarret can probably shine a lot of light on Texas Tech. I think that they're worthy of being in the conversation right now, along with an Iowa State or maybe a Baylor, and certainly Kansas as well. But I certainly feel like Houston is at the top of the league, and you've got a good number of teams that are kind of trying to see if they can finish second or maybe earn a share of the conference title.
Yeah, I agree with Alec. I mean, Houston, if you roll the ball out on neutral court, I think they're the best team. I really do.
Right.
Just because of what you said, the defensive ability, the physicality, and then they have guards who can knock down shots in big moments. So I think they're the best team. I would pick them to go the farthest in the tournament, just right as it stands right now. That being said, that win for Texas Tech Monday night did even things up a little bit, or quite a lot in the standings. I mean, you have those 5 teams that was just mentioned within a game and a half as it stands Tuesday afternoon.
Absolutely.
That's amazing at this point, and good teams. And Tech's not ranked currently, but I mean, they were 13th just 2 weeks ago. And they probably will be, depending on what happens Saturday, I think, in terms of not getting blown out in Ames. They'll more than likely be at least in the top 25 and get back again after this week. But I think Iowa State has a real chance of winning. I think Baylor, I don't know. Baylor seems like it's a good team. They're doing what they're supposed to for the most part, but I have a hard time seeing Baylor winning the conference right now. But they should definitely be mentioned in the mix because they're right there in the standings. But Texas Tech has an opportunity. I think there's 2 reasons why. One, their Achilles heel this year has been rebounding. But the last 3 games, they've really improved. I mean, they out-rebounded Kansas 42-26 last night. That really opened my eyes. That was impressive. Not that Kansas is some great rebounding team, but that shows some improvement. Also, their schedule. They have West Virginia, Oklahoma State remaining. I'm not saying it's going to be – those are definite wins. I don't know if they really exist in this conference this year. But they also have Baylor and TCU at home. They played them away already. So that gives Tech an opportunity to go on a little roll here, at least be competitive. Obviously, this Saturday on paper is the toughest remaining game. I mean, Hilton Coliseum every year, no matter how good Iowa State is it's a tough place. A lot like we talked about before, Lubbock, Manhattan, those kinds of places are just tough to play at. But Iowa State is clearly a quality team. I can't say I've watched a ton. I've watched some of Iowa State. I'll probably watch more leading up to the game Saturday. But, Tech would have to play – I know this sounds crazy, but they'd have to get much better guard play than they got in terms of from Pop Isaacs and Joe Toussaint than they got Monday night. They actually didn't shoot well at all, either one of them. Now, Darren Williams had a historic night, 30 points, 11 rebounds, 12 for 12 from the field, including 4 3-pointers, made both his free throws. Also had 3 assists, 2 steals and a block. He had like an all-time type game against Kansas. And I'm not expecting him to duplicate that. But Pop Isaacs and Joe Toussaint have to play better moving forward if they really want to be, or in terms of shooting, if they want to be considered a legitimate contender for the Big 12.
Gotcha. One team that I tried to write off early in the Big 12 season, they were ranked really high. They had a good, as far as a win-loss record, non-conference schedule, was Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma, the way that they can get after it a little bit, as long as they can score enough, sorry about that, as long as they can score enough baskets, I think Oklahoma has an opportunity to do something because they get after you, they defend, they're starting to play better. I just think Oklahoma, again, it was a team that I thought, the non-conference schedule, they didn't play anybody. The one team they did, they got beat. I'm like, I don't know how good they are. Then they didn't start the conference off great. And now they've started to come back a little bit. I think Oklahoma is another team, Jarret, that we've got to watch just for the simple fact is, again, we're talking about defense, and I think Oklahoma gets after you defensively.
Yeah, when you said that, I started thinking, I know in previous shows we talked about how many NCAA tournament teams do you think there are in the Big 12 this year? And I'm starting to think, like, how many teams could make the Sweet 16 from the Big 12?
Right.
And I mean,
right.
maybe a half a dozen teams from the Big 12. I mean, I'm not all at the same time, but potentially could, like, have the ability, depending on the draw and all their health and all that. I mean, there are 6 legitimate teams that could go 2 rounds, could get to the second weekend of the tournament. I really believe that. And Oklahoma, yes, they could defend. They kind of remind me of Baylor. Excuse me. Good team, not great. I don't know if I really consider them to be contend for a regular season tournament or regular season championship, but they could win the Big 12 tournament and they could go a couple rounds deep at least in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma we're going to find out a lot about this week because they play Baylor on Tuesday night. So tonight on the road in Waco, and then on Saturday they turn around and they play Kansas in Norman. I'll be honest with you, I don't think that there's a game that Kansas can play on the road at this point that I'm going to feel comfortable writing in ink that is a Big 12 road win for KU. Until they start winning games on the road, I just can't do that. So I think that'll certainly be a really good game on Saturday afternoon against KU. I think tonight will be tough going on the road to Baylor, but I think Baylor's defense is so susceptible to talented guards kind of giving them issues. And when you look at the way Oklahoma is constructed, you're looking at Javion McCollum, who's had a really, really good year after transferring from Siena. Otega Owe has had an awesome year for them as well. And then I think, Milos Uzan is someone who entering the season, everyone was kind of viewing as a potential breakout candidate in the Big 12, and he hasn't necessarily lived up to that. But their top 2 of McCollum and Owe has been really, really good for Oklahoma. And like you said, they've won 3 of their last 4. The one loss in there is on the road at UCF, who's kind of proven to be frisky on the road. Or I should say when they're at home, because they've got a couple good wins at home. So
they do.
I think this week is a good opportunity for Oklahoma to kind of really make a statement where if they are able to go 2-0, then you're looking at an Oklahoma team that's suddenly 8-5 in the Big 12.
Right. I was
We
listening
haven't even
last
mentioned
night.
Texas real quick. I just want to throw out there, how good the Big 12 is. I mean, Texas could go two rounds deep, depending on the draw. I mean, I believe that.
No, you beat me to it, Jarret. I was literally just going to bring it up. You literally beat me to it. Like, I was just going to say the team that we talked about that we don't talk about that very well might be the most talented player for player in the conference is Texas. And we don't even talk about them like, they can't do anything. And I think it's because, they've struggled, don't get me wrong, and they are going to struggle to get in the tournament. But that's a team that I think, as far as the Big 12 tournament, that they could go in and win 3 games and then all of a sudden get into the tournament. And then you're like, okay, well, they got into the tournament. And then all of a sudden, because there's always 3 or 4 teams that get into the Sweet 16. And you're like, man, how did they get here? You know what? They struggled. They didn't play up to potential all year long. They got hot at the right time. I think Texas, as much as we may not want to talk about that, but I think Texas is going to be one of those teams that if they can find a way to just get hot at the right time, and as you both know, when you get in the tournament, it's about matchups. And a lot of times matchups means my talent is better than your talent at a lot of times at the guard position or wherever. And just talent for talent, it's tough to say that Texas doesn't match up, not just anybody in the conference, anybody in the country. So if they get there, I think it's just one of those teams that can do some damage that nobody is really talking about at all.
Yeah, I really like their guard play. I really like Max Asmus. He's obviously a bucket getter. I think Tyrese Hunter has been inconsistent in his career as an offensive player, but you know that the potential is there, and I think he's a really good table setter for them. I think Dylan Disu might actually be one of my favorite players in the entire Big 12. He obviously missed the first month and a half-ish of the season with an injury that he sustained in the NCAA tournament, I believe it was. Yeah. But since coming back, he's shooting, I think, 53% on the year in Big 12 play. He's been incredible. I think averaging about 18 points a game in conference play as well. He's someone for me right now, I think, is a lock to be a first-team All Big 12 selection. I love the game that Dylan Disu has. My one question with Texas is, you're asking their guards to make a ton of shots because I don't think that you're seeing a guy like Dylan Mitchell or Katie Cedric make a ton of shots, especially from the interior. Like, they don't have a great back to the basket player, so it puts a lot of stress on their guards to make jumpers, Jarret. And I think that that's something that is concerning. But like I said, I think Max Stacemus is a true bucket getter, one of the best in the country. Someone who's averaging, whatever it is, points a game. I mean, he's shooting 40%, I think, from three on the year. So he's had a really good year for them and has been one of the better transfer additions at the guard position in the Big 12.
I love what you said about Disu. I think he's great. He's the type of player that if you're going to do anything in terms of in your conference or make a tournament run, you got to have a player like that. He kind of reminds me of what Darian Williams does for Texas Tech, to be honest. Good rebounder. He's always looking for the open man, but he could fill it up now if given the opportunity. And like you said, he was injured earlier in the year, and I think that kind of messed with the chemistry. I think if he had been healthy, going into the season, everything, I think that would have made a big difference for this team. And it seems like they're still trying to kind of figure out, like you said, what to do with their bigs, who's the alpha kind of, who's going to take over in those important moments, that kind of thing. So we'll see if it could come together and they can get hot. But I really like Disu. He's an Austin native, so you get why he went to UT and has been a good player for them for a couple of years now.
Yeah, I definitely like what Texas can do. I saw a couple of comments about your all's game. We're going to pick those up in the second half once we get to it here. A couple of other things in the conference. I heard Fran Facella talk last night, and he was talking about the number of teams that could get in the conference. And I know I'd thrown out a wild number before saying 11 teams could get in. I knew there was going to be some cannibalization that went on, but I just thought enough teams could stay competitive enough to get 11 teams into the tournament. Now, I think that we're going to see that the teams are competitive. Don't get me wrong, but I think the cannibalization is starting to take effect. One of those teams, unfortunately, happens to be Kansas State. Now, they're not that far off. They're close. I still believe that if a team can get to 9 wins, I think they're going to get into the tournament. I just think in this conference, the way that it is, if you can get to 500, I think you're going to get in. I'm starting to look at the standings right now. Getting there, though, that's where the tough part comes in. I know we always set that bar at, okay, if ever you get to 9, well, then you start looking at the remaining schedules, and not just for Kansas State. It goes for a lot of these teams, like Cincinnati is at 4-6 right now, Texas 5-6, BYU 5-5. Where do we get those wins? I know we talked about UCF too. They're 4-6. It's like, okay, Jarret, yes, you got to get to 9 wins, but where do you get those wins at? Because you start looking at schedules, there's just no gimme.
It's really not. And the thing is the margin for error is so slim. I mean, if you have, like, in Texas Tech's case, like the flu go through your team or one important player go down for a week or something, I mean, that could be the difference between making, getting enough wins, making the tournament or not. And then it's going to be really interesting to see how the Big 12 tournament goes. Who's it going to be important to? All those things, the matchups, how that works out. I was just looking at how I hadn't even thought about. I hadn't gotten that far, just in terms of how the tournament, the seeding's going to work and all that. I was just looking at that the other night and was kind of like, this is going to be interesting. And normally, I don't really care about conference tournaments that much because I don't think the selection committee puts a lot of weight on them. But this conference this year, I think, is unique. So I'm actually looking forward to the Big 12 tournament this year. But in terms of Kansas State, I'd have to see the schedule. I don't know. Honestly, I haven't paid like a ton of attention specifically to Kansas State recently. But I mean, where are they at right now in the standings, B?
They are, let me go back to it. They are 9th or 10th actually in the standings.
You cut out. Where are they at?
They're
10th? Okay.
They're 11th.
I mean, 10th.
It's 10th. So it's tough, man. Their schedule, and it's not just them. I'm just talking about in general. BYU on down. Yeah. We're looking at they're 5-5. You take everybody on down to get to that 9th win. I just don't know how many teams are going to get there, I guess is the better question. I don't know how easily these teams are going to get to that 9th win, even though we've set that as the plateau.
I still think it's going to be 8 or 9 Big 12 teams probably make the tournament. Sorry, I'll go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I look at K-State's path, and I think it's pretty bleak for them to make it to the NCAA tournament. If you look at their Bart Torvik page, it gives them less than a 5% chance of making it to the NCAA tournament. If you look at their KenPom and Torvik pages, they're only projected to win one more of their games the rest of the way, and it's the game against West Virginia and Manhattan. Now, they'll win more than just one of their last 6 or 7 games, but I do think that they're kind of in an interesting spot where, they don't have a ton of the great teams in the league left on their schedule. They already played Houston. They already have played Iowa State. I think their last, 2 games could go a really long way in terms of their opportunities to make the NCAA tournament, where they go on the road to play Kansas and then they return home to play Iowa State. Well, no one wins at Kansas.
Absolutely.
It's tough to bank on that.
Absolutely.
I don't know the last time K-State won there. And then I think the Iowa State game at the end of the regular season is a really big one for K-State if they do want to make the NCAA tournament. But there's a path for them. It's just it comes down to winning a lot of these toss-up games. Like Saturday against TCU is really important for them. I think the game at the Moody Center against Texas on Big Monday is going to be really important for them as well. But Texas has been pretty good at home for the most part this season, aside from, they lost to Iowa State at home. I know they lost to Houston in the Moody Center as well. And I think they took, Tech as well. So they're generally pretty good there. They just need to win a few of these toss-up games. And then if you can get one of those last 2, I think that would go a really long way for K-State making the NCAA tournament, because we know the committee looks so much more at who have you beaten and where did you beat them, as opposed to who did you lose to. They care so much about your quality of wins. That's why we hear them talk so much about Q1 and Q2 wins.
Gotcha. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break here from our partners at Synergy Financial. We'll come right back, and we'll let you two battle it out over what's going to happen this weekend between Texas Tech and Iowa State. We'll be right back.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, we are live on YouTube Tuesday through Friday at 1 p.m. Central Time, so we appreciate everybody joining us. So, again, let's dig back into this hoop. So, big game coming up Saturday, Iowa State and Tech. We had a question here that I will bring up, and it's just basic. Could Tech catch Iowa State on Saturday? Looking forward to UH on Big Monday. So, can Tech, do you think well, let's start with you, Jarret. Is that a game that they can win? Obviously, they can win it, but what are the thoughts on being able to go to Hilton and winning this game?
It's going to be a challenge. I mean, just based on the venue. Honestly, if it was in Lubbock, I'd feel completely different about it. I mean, I know that's oversimplification, but sometimes the answer really is that simple. When you're talking about home crowds, home atmospheres like at Hilton Coliseum and the USA here in Lubbock. That being said, Tech's health is kind of up and down right now. Warren Washington is beat up. He's had the flu. He's had back problems. He's been wearing a back brace. He had some kind of knee problem too last night. So, and he's really indispensable. Robert Jennings, who's a sophomore, come off the bench. He's been playing much better. He had 8 points and 6 rebounds last night against Kansas, but he's no Warren Washington. Warren's the one guy Tech really can't be without. If he's not close to 100%, I don't see Tech having just like a great shot at beating Iowa State. That being said, I expect the spread to be somewhere 3, 4, 5 points. I mean, nothing crazy, despite Iowa State being a top 10 team and being at home. I definitely have the Cyclones favored, but if Texas Tech can continue to crash the boards, specifically the defensive boards, and like they have the last 3 games, as opposed to earlier in Big 12 play, then and they get hot from 3, then maybe they have a chance. I mean, they're definitely good enough. They have the offensive skill players and the talent to compete with Iowa State. I mean, they played Baylor on the road in Waco, even without Warren Washington, to within 7. They beat Texas on the road. They have, this is a competitive team, and they're a resilient bunch. Yeah. So it's hard for me to ever be like, oh, I don't see them winning this game, even against a quality team like Iowa State in such a great atmosphere.
Yeah, I would certainly pick Iowa State heading into Saturday. I think Iowa State's going to go undefeated at home this year. They've won 14 in a row, dating back to last season at home, I believe it is. It's one of the longer streaks in the country. And they've also just played really, really well at home. When you look at some of their wins at home this season, they already beat Houston at home. They beat Kansas at home. They were up by a significant margin against K-State at home. They've just done a really good job inside of Hilton Coliseum this year. And I also think I'm a big, shooting generally kind of works its way out to the averages game to game. And Texas Tech shot it, close to 50% yesterday against KU. They shot close to 40% from 3. Those are generally things that I don't think translate game to game, especially when you go on the road. And then you factor in how good Iowa State's defense is this season. And I think it's another opportunity for Tech to kind of regress to the mean a little bit as a shooting performance. But at the same time, Texas Tech's offense has been what's kind of carried them to their 18-6 record this year. And they're a good shooting team. They have been for most of the season. And you take that a little bit further, and Iowa State hasn't been the greatest at defending the 3-point line. It's the one thing that they kind of give up on the court, that side of the court, I should say, defensively, is 3-point defense. So there's certainly a path for Texas Tech to beat Iowa State on Saturday. It's shoot the ball well from the perimeter, make some of those open looks with their guard play, like you said, Jarret. And, speaking to Pop Isaac's needing to kind of make a few shots for Tech to come up here and win on Saturday. But there's a path. I just think Iowa State should be viewed as the favorite just because they're at home, and Hilton has been such a hellhole for some of the Big 12's top teams. When you look at the way Houston played in here, look at the way KU played in here, I think that Iowa State should be viewed as a clear favorite.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think Tech. I just think it's going to be a really good game. They're going to get after it. I think kind of what you said, Jarret. I think Tech coming back, getting a little bit healthier, or as far as sickness. Everybody's a little bit banged up at this time of the year. Everybody's got a little bit bumps and bruises. Somebody's ankles tweaked or something of that nature. But, flu-like symptoms and stuff like that when you're ill, that's something different that can just wipe you out for 72 hours, and then you'll be okay. Well, a lot of times you have 2 games in those 72 hours. So, it kind of is what it is there. But moving on to the conference, when I think about the Big 12 as a whole, and what we can do. And I know you touched on a little bit earlier, Jarret, is how many teams can get to the Sweet 16. If we shift that and say, well, who can go further? Who can get to the Final Four? I know we've talked about it before, but I know this thing changes kind of week to week, it seems like. Is there somebody on the outside looking in that maybe people don't think right now can make it to the Final Four within the conference? Alec, I'll start with you. Is there somebody that maybe we're not thinking about? Because, there's always a surprise team that makes it to the Final Four anyway. There's always somebody that we don't think that's going to get there, that gets hot at the right time. Who would that be in the Big 12 this year?
That is a really good question, one that I have not thought about. But my thing with the Big 12 this year, I certainly think it's the best conference. It's better than the SEC. It's better than the Big East. I just don't know how many true, Final Four national championship contenders the league has. I don't think Kansas is one of those.
Right.
I have some concerns about Houston's offense being good enough to get them there because they're not a very good shooting team. And so much of their offense is predicated on being able to get offensive rebounds where they're getting 39 or 40% of their misses, which is an incredible number. That being said, I just struggle to see how many teams are able to actually win a national championship or make it to a Final Four in the Big 12, but it's still the best conference at the same time. I guess Baylor's a team that I could see maybe making it to the Final Four because of the way their guards can shoot it and light it up from the perimeter. I think Ray J. Dennis is a really, really good player. I think Jacoby Walter is one of the most talented freshmen in the country. And then I really like what Yves Missy is kind of giving them on the interior. But their defense really concerns me. And general rule of thumb is you have to be like a top 30, top 35 defense in the country to make a run. And they're closer to like 60 or 70. So I don't know if I really think that Baylor can do it. And I don't, as much as I believe in this Iowa State team, I don't know if their offense is good enough to beat a team if it does turn into a little bit of a shootout in the NCAA tournament. So I don't know if there's a team that's like not being talked about as a Final Four contender in the Big 12 that I feel comfortable saying is. I just feel like it's the best conference because of the amount of teams that I feel like can make it to the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I actually disagree on the Baylor one because of what you said. I don't think they defend well enough to make a run to the Final Four. And I think Houston is so elite on defense and with their physicality that despite, like you said, their limitations on offense, I think they can make a run to the Final Four. I know people are talking about, so that's not directly answering your question, B. But I'm interested in Iowa State. I want to see what they have. You obviously know a lot better than I do. If you're saying maybe not, then but then again, we'll have to see who they draw, what the matchups are. But I'm definitely interested in watching Iowa State more this week, and then obviously Saturday and seeing what they're all about. Coaching, I think, is one of the more under talked about things in terms of the tournament. I've seen it in Tech's runs firsthand, whether it be Coach K or Tom Izzo or whatever, just some of the adjustments some of these guys make. And there's a reason why they make the big bucks. And I think that's not talked about a lot. Kelvin Sampson, Bill Self, obviously Scott Drew, all those guys. I mean, they are kind of like an ace in the hole when it gets to the tournament. Eventually it does come down to the Jimmies and Joes. Yes. But some of these coaching staffs are great in the tournament. And you really see that, especially once you get beyond the first weekend where it's like, whoa, these guys they know the favorite colors of the opposing players, like the 12th guy on the bench. It's pretty amazing how much work these coaching staffs put into it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, I heard a long time ago is that, look, the players can get you to the Final Four. I go, but then it's the coaches that win the national championship. It's like you got to have the players to get through and to shuffle through. But once you get down to the Final Four, these coaches, they know so much. They analyze everything. They know the ins and outs, and they were the ones that can get you there. To answer my own question a little bit, guys, as far as I know, a lot of people are talking about Houston, and I like Houston. Don't get me wrong. They play outstanding defense. I think the thing that's going to get them in trouble in the NCAA tournament, and unfortunately it's not going to be to their own fault, is they play so aggressive on defense, but they don't shoot it well. So they're not going to shoot it well no matter what. But then they're going to run into an officiating crew that's going to call it so tight. And then they're going to be in foul trouble when they're not used to it. And then what do you do? That's the thing. Now, we just talked about coaches making adjustments. I get that. But it's hard to get your team to not be aggressive when they've been aggressive literally all year long. I feel like Houston can get in trouble that way. And again, it would be to no fault of their own because, hey, if you run into a crew that's just calling a tight game, it is what it is. You're playing aggressive, and then you don't shoot it well, trying to get all those offensive rebounds, and they're calling fouls. And I just feel like Houston might get in trouble. So to your point, Alec, yeah, they might be the favorite, but I'm just not sure that they can make I'm just not sure they can make the run. I kind of lean towards what you said is the conference is the best. I'm not sure there's a Final Four team in it.
Yeah, I would pick Houston as the most likely team to make it to the Final Four. And while I do have a lot of the same concerns that you do, when you look back at their last, 3 NCAA tournament appearances, they've made it to a Final Four, they've made it to an Elite Eight, and they've made it to a Sweet 16. So, their formula has worked in the NCAA tournament for at least making it to the second weekend. And they were kind of on the ropes last year against Auburn in the round of 32, and they were a 1 seed. And they ended up making it to the Sweet 16 before they lost. I forget who they lost to end their season last year as a 1 seed. But I feel comfortable with them getting to the Sweet 16. I think that Houston is closer to the and they're in this group. Houston is, at least in my opinion, they're in the same group of like North Carolina, Tennessee, and like maybe Arizona than they are to the group of Kansas, Duke, Illinois, and Wisconsin. From teams from other conferences. From a national perspective, I think that there's kind of like a couple different tiers where it's like it's Houston, it's very clearly UConn and Purdue as 1A, 1B. You can have them however you'd like. And then I think that there's a group of 2 or 3 that's like Houston, Tennessee, North Carolina, and if you want to put Arizona in that group, be my guess. But then there's a whole big group of teams that I feel like no one has no idea how far they're going to go. When you look at people looking at brackets where it's like, well, Duke's a 5 seed right now, or Duke's a 4 seed right now. Well, they looked like crap last night in the first half against Wake Forest, and Jay Williams was walking off set at halftime. And then you've got Wisconsin, who's lost, I think, 3 or 4 in a row, and they lost on the road against the worst team in the Big Ten in Michigan, and they lost on the road at Rutgers, right? Like that those are teams that people would feel pretty comfortable, I think, in some people's eyes, picking to go to the Sweet 16, but other people would be like, not a chance. So I think that there's a couple teams where everyone's going to be like, okay, that's a Sweet 16, that's a Final Four team. But other than that, like, it's going to be really, really hard to get 16 teams there that I feel like a lot of people feel confident of getting to the second weekend outside of Purdue and UConn for me.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. The one thing, another part about it, we always leave out, a lot of people leave out the Big East. And the Big East, I think, is a really good basketball conference with like Marquette. I think Marquette is a really good basketball team. I think they get left out of it. Now, a lot of that is, look, I know a lot of people are high on Shaka Smart. Ever since his VCU run, I'm not sure how great of a coach he is. Again, Marquette was really good last year. He hasn't had the type of tournament success that I think that we believe that he should have. You know, he was at Texas and didn't do a lot with Texas, and they had a lot of good players while he was there. So the Big East, I think, has some teams, a team that's not as good, and that's another thing as far as Kansas State fans are thinking, oh, man, we beat Villanova, and Villanova's good. Well, yeah, Villanova's not any good. They're not any good. And it was a struggle to beat them. So that's another kind of notch there. But moving on, I just think, and trying to wrap this show up, as the Big 12 as a whole, I just believe that we're going to get 8 to 9 teams in, like you said, Jarret. I think that's for sure. Do they get a 10th? It's going to depend on these last couple of weeks here on who wins where and how. But another thing that you said, Jarret, that I 100% agree with, the Big 12 tournament, I think, is going to be incredible. I think it's going to be one of the best tournaments and I've seen a lot of them because I lived in Kansas City for a lot of years, and I've seen a lot of them. I think this is going to be, if not the best one that they've ever had, you'll have to name me another one. You'll have to point it out where it's going to be better than what this tournament is coming up this year.
Yeah, I can't wait. And again, this goes against what I've said for I don't know how many years, just because, again, I don't think the selection committee puts a lot of weight on the conference tournaments. I mean, I think that's borne out year after year. But in terms of just being a basketball fan and wanting to watch some great basketball, some competitive games, I think it could make a difference for a couple of those teams, maybe that 9th or 10th team that we were talking about, whoever that might be, a Kansas State or Texas or somebody like that. It could matter for them. So I can't wait. I mean, get your popcorn ready.
Yeah, I agree a lot with Jarret on the idea that like they don't matter as much as I think fans maybe think they do, because so much of the field is already set by that point when you're talking about the NCAA tournament field. And you'll see some teams move their way in and some teams move their way out with wins or losses. I think Indiana's a team who did that a couple of years ago, where they ended up moving into the first 4 after making a run to the Big Ten tournament championship game where they lost to Iowa. I think that's an example of a team maybe playing their way into the NCAA tournament field via their conference tournament. But I think it'll certainly be a good lot of fun in Kansas City because there's so many teams that are just so evenly matched in the league that it's going to be really hard if you're filling out a Big 12 tournament bracket with your office buddies or your friends for some money, that it's going to be really hard to pick a winner just because of how good the league is and how hard it is to predict who's just going to win on every Tuesday and every Saturday.
Yeah, I just think, especially playing with neutral site games and being in the way that it is, teams playing so good at home that don't play good on the road. Well, now it's a neutral site, getting you ready for the NCAA tournament. I just think if there's any time that the league has prepared each other for the NCAA tournament, this would be the year. That this has got to be the year that it's prepared each other for what's coming in the NCAA tournament. So I want to thank both of you guys again, man, for joining us. Oh, go ahead, Jarret. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
I know I could hear Texas Tech fans in the background saying neutral site. Come on. Kansas State, Iowa State. I mean, there's going to be more of those fans from those fan bases there because of where it is. And that's fine. But I'm just saying it is a neutral site technically, but I mean, come on. There's going to be a lot of fans from those fan bases.
I understand. I totally understand. However, I will say this. I know the Big 12 has toiled with trying to move the Big 12 tournament to other places, and it didn't work. Even when it was in Dallas, I mean, nobody in Dallas even cared. And so there wasn't very many people there. I just think that in Kansas City, the people in Kansas City cared. They put on a first-class show. I get what you're saying, though, Jarret. I 100% understand that it is a home field advantage for KU. Iowa State brings everybody. They do an excellent job. Kansas State does the same thing. I get that part of it. But technically, it is on a neutral site, though. Technically, it is. So
I don't want it to move. I just wanted to point out that.
No. Absolutely. I understand. So, well, again, thank you guys for joining us today, man. We will obviously have you guys back. We appreciate your time today. We'll take one quick break from our partners at Synergy Financial, and then we'll wrap up the show.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
Well, guys, look, I know that, the Big 12, it's just tough. This year, it is just tough. I know that your team, especially Kansas State fans, you're thinking, man, we should be better than this. Well, you still have opportunity. I know you might be struggling now. You may be looking at Cincinnati, and maybe your team is struggling. Or you look at Texas, you're a Texas fan, and your team is not as good as what you think. Guys, there's still a lot of basketball left to be played. There's still a ton left. Your season's not over. There's no reason to give up hope right now. We are all trying to be realistic, and we understand what that means. But at the same time, it's college basketball. Anything can happen. So just give it time. Keep rooting. Keep screaming loud. And who knows? Maybe your team will win, and maybe they'll make a run. Maybe they'll get to the NCAA tournament when you don't think they can. Just remember, there's still time left for them to make it. Just keep rooting. Thank you guys for joining the Big 12 Insiders again. Tuesday through Friday, 1 p.m. Central Time. Tell a friend. Tell them to jump in. Remember to subscribe on Go Power Cat on YouTube. Subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. We appreciate all of it. We will be back tomorrow, and we'll do it better.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.